The wine was a deep, blood-red Cabernet, a bottle she had been saving for a special occasion. It hit my chest with a cold shock, the dark liquid instantly blooming across the cheap cotton of my work shirt. Isabella stood before me, the empty glass held loosely in her hand, her face a mask of contemptuous dismissal. Her eyes, which I once thought held the entire universe, were now just cold, hard stones. She had been on the phone, laughing, her voice a high, excited trill that had become so rare in our house. She was talking about the deal, the one she called her masterpiece, the culmination of her life's work. The sale of her tech startup, Innovatech, to the monolithic holding company, Aurelian Global. An $800 million deal that would catapult her into a stratosphere I couldn't even comprehend. Or so she believed. I had come home from a long day at the construction site, my hands calloused and a fine layer of dust coating my clothes, and I had simply wanted to congratulate her. But my presence, my very existence in that moment, was an unwelcome intrusion on her glorious ascent. She turned her back to me, speaking into her phone again. "Sorry about that, Julian. Just a minor, grubby interruption." I stood there, the wine dripping from my shirt onto the pristine white marble floor, a single perfect red tear. And in that silent, cold moment, I knew everything had to change. My name is Mark, and for the last 15 years I had been what most people would call a simple man. I was a project manager for a mid-sized construction firm, a job I was good at. It was tangible work. I took blueprints, abstract lines on a page, and turned them into steel and concrete realities. I liked the honesty of it. A wall is either plumb or it isn't. A foundation is either solid or it will fail. There are no shortcuts, no illusions. I lived my life by that same principle. I was a faithful husband, a steady provider, and a quiet supporter of my wife's ambitions. But let me start from the beginning. Isabella and I met in college. She was studying business and I was in civil engineering. She had a fire in her, a restless energy that I found captivating. I was the quiet anchor to her brilliant, soaring kite. She had dreams of changing the world, of building an empire. I just wanted to build a life. For a long time, those two goals seemed to run on parallel tracks. We married a year after graduation. I took the job with the construction firm because it was stable. It offered good pay, a pension, and the kind of security I thought was essential to build a family on. Isabella, however, chafed at the idea of a traditional career path. She bounced between corporate jobs, always feeling constrained, always believing she was meant for more. "I can't just be a cog in someone else's machine, Mark," she'd say, pacing our small living room. "I need to build the machine." I believed in her. I saw her intelligence, her drive. So when she came to me 5 years ago with the idea for Innovatech, a small startup focused on a niche software solution for logistics companies, I didn't hesitate. I liquidated a stock portfolio my grandfather had left me, a significant sum I had been saving for a down payment on a bigger house. "Are you sure about this?" I had asked, watching her eyes light up as she sketched out her business plan on a napkin. "It's a sure thing, Mark," she'd promised, her hand covering mine. "This is our future. This will make us." I gave her every penny. I took on extra weekend shifts to cover the bills while she worked tirelessly to get the company off the ground. I learned to cook, to clean, to manage the entire household so she could focus every ounce of her energy on her dream. I became the silent, invisible scaffolding that supported the construction of her grand ambition. And for a while it worked. The company grew, slowly at first, then with more momentum. She hired a small team. She started getting noticed by industry publications. She was brilliant, I never doubted that. But as her star began to rise, something inside our home began to dim. The woman I had married started to recede, replaced by a CEO. Our conversations shifted from shared dreams to her quarterly reports. My world of concrete pours and rebar schedules seemed to bore her. She began to see it not as the foundation of our life, but as an anchor holding her back. Her disdain was subtle at first. A sigh when I came home smelling of sawdust. A raised eyebrow at my steel-toed boots left by the door. A joke at a dinner party about my salt-of-the-earth job that felt less like a joke and more like an indictment. "Mark is so grounded," she'd say, with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "He keeps me from getting my head too far in the clouds." It was framed as a compliment, but we both knew it was a criticism. She was a woman in the clouds, and I was the man stuck firmly on the dirt below. Then came Julian. He was a venture capitalist who took an interest in Innovatech. He was everything I wasn't. He wore $1,000 suits, drove a car that looked like it belonged on a racetrack, and spoke in a language of acquisitions, mergers, and market disruption that was completely foreign to me. Isabella called him her mentor. She started spending more and more time with him. Late-night strategy sessions. Business trips to conferences I wasn't invited to. Her phone, which used to lie casually on the kitchen counter, was now perpetually clutched in her hand or placed face down. I wasn't a fool. I knew what was happening, but I was methodical. I didn't believe in emotional outbursts. I believed in data. I saw the credit card statements filled with charges for lavish dinners I hadn't attended and hotel rooms in cities she was supposedly visiting alone. The data was clear. The foundation of our marriage was cracked beyond repair. Yet I did nothing. I simply observed. I watched as she grew more distant, more enamored with the world Julian represented. A world of effortless wealth and glossy success. My world, my steady, predictable, tangible world, became a source of open embarrassment for her. One evening, she came home from a meeting, her face flushed with excitement. "Aurelian Global is interested," she announced, her voice trembling. "They're talking about a full acquisition. The numbers are astronomical." I knew of Aurelian Global. Everyone did. They were a notoriously private, almost mythical holding company that swallowed up promising businesses and turned them into global powerhouses. They were known for their aggressive tactics and their reclusive, never-seen owner who controlled everything from the shadows. "That's incredible, Bella," I said, genuinely happy for her professional success. She barely looked at me. "Julian set up the meeting. He says this is the big one. This is our ticket out." I noticed the slip. Our ticket out. But she wasn't looking at me when she said it. She was looking out the window, at a future that I was clearly not a part of. The negotiations with Aurelian went on for weeks. Isabella was a whirlwind of frantic energy, always on the phone. Her conversations peppered with terms like due diligence, synergy, and valuation. She started treating me less like a husband and more like a piece of furniture she had forgotten to put in storage. That brings me back to the wine. She had just gotten off the phone with her legal team. The deal was all but done. The final signing was scheduled for the following week. She was celebrating on the phone with Julian when I walked in. I had heard her say, "I can't wait for this to be over. Then we can finally start our real life." My heart didn't break. It was already broken. It simply registered the final data point. The project was a failure. The structure was condemned. It was time for a controlled demolition. After she poured the wine on me and dismissed me as a grubby interruption, I didn't say a word. I turned, walked up the stairs, and went into the bathroom. I took off the stained shirt and dropped it into the trash can. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was calm. My hands were steady. The emotional chaos she had created was a storm raging outside a well-built fortress. Inside, there was only silence and a single, clear objective. I went into my home office, a small room she never entered, and closed the door. I picked up my personal phone, a simple device separate from the one I used for daily life, and made a call. It rang twice before he picked up. "David," I said. "Mark." His voice was calm and familiar. David Chun was my lawyer, but he was more than that. He was the only person on earth who knew the truth about my life. We had been friends since we were roommates in a cramped dorm room, long before either of us had anything to our names. "It's late. Is everything all right?" "She crossed the line," I said, my voice flat, repertorial. "The deal with Aurelian is set to close next week. She's celebrating." There was a pause on the other end of the line. David knew about Isabella's affair, about her growing contempt for me. He had been advising patience, urging me to wait for the right moment. "What did she do?" he asked quietly. I described the scene, the phone call with Julian, the dismissive words, the wine poured on my chest. I related all without emotion, like a project manager reporting a delay on a job site. David let out a long, slow breath. "Mark, I am so sorry. No one deserves that." "It's not about what I deserve, David," I replied. "It's about what comes next. The plan is active. I want you to draw up the divorce papers. No alimony, no division of assets beyond what is legally hers from her salary. The house is in a trust. The cars are leased through a holding company. She gets her personal belongings and the balance of her checking account. Nothing else. Mark, she'll fight it. She'll claim marital assets. She'll argue her company's value was built during the marriage." "Her company," I said, a cold certainty settling in my bones, "is about to become a non-issue. I want the papers served the day before the Aurelian signing. I want her to walk into that boardroom thinking she's a victorious queen, only to have her world dismantled piece by piece." "You're sure you want to do it this way? You own the entire board she's presenting to. You can just kill the deal now." "No," I stated firmly. "The process is important. The foundation has to be exposed before you can demolish the building. She needs to be sitting at that table, at the absolute peak of her arrogance and success, when she finds out who I am. She needs to understand the scale of her miscalculation. You see, the story I told Isabella, the story I told everyone, was only a partial truth. I was a project manager. I did work in construction. But the mid-sized firm I worked for was a subsidiary, a small, unassuming cog in a much larger machine. A machine that I owned. My grandfather hadn't just left me a small stock portfolio. He had left me everything. He had built a vast, private empire of construction, logistics, and technology firms, all held under a single, discrete corporate umbrella. An umbrella named Aurelian Global. I had taken over 15 years ago after his passing. But I had no interest in the lavish lifestyle. I found meaning in the work itself, in the tangible act of building. So I installed a trusted board of directors, managed my empire from a distance, and took a hands-on role at one of my smaller companies to keep my skills sharp and my life simple. I never told Isabella. I wanted her to love me for who I was, not what I owned. For a long time, I thought she did. Now, I saw it was just another miscalculation. The next few days were a study in methodical execution. While Isabella was busy with her lawyers and celebrating with Julian, I was systematically building my fortress. David and I worked through the nights. We activated the private investigator I had placed on retainer months ago. His job wasn't to prove the affair. That was a given. His job was to trace the money. The report was clinical and devastating. He provided flight manifests, hotel receipts, and credit card statements that showed Isabella had been using Innovateca's corporate account, the one funded by my initial investment, to pay for lavish getaways with Julian. They had flown to Paris, to Rome, to the Caribbean, all under the guise of business development. More damningly, he uncovered emails where Julian advised her on how to hide these expenses, how to classify them as legitimate corporate costs. He had also found evidence that Julian's seed funding in her company was a sham. He had invested a token amount in exchange for a large chunk of equity, vastly overvaluing his contribution and diluting the company's worth, all while billing her for exorbitant consulting fees that she paid from the company account. It was a classic grift, and she had walked right into it, blinded by his charm and the promise of a life she craved. I saved every document, every file, organizing them into a neat, undeniable dossier of fraud and deception. While she was planning her glorious future, I was cataloging the precise details of her downfall. At home, I moved into the guest room. I was polite, distant, a ghost in the house we had built together. Isabella took my silence for weakness. She saw it as the pathetic resignation of a defeated man. "I need some space, Mark," she said one evening, not even looking up from her laptop. "I have to be at the top of my game for this meeting. Your negativity is just draining." "I understand," I replied, my voice even. Her lips curled into a faint, smug smile. Good. I'm glad you're finally seeing things realistically. After the deal closes, we'll have our lawyers talk. I'll be fair, of course. But you have to understand, my life is going in a very different direction now. She thought I was the one who needed to see things realistically. The dramatic irony was so thick I could almost taste it. She was like a character in a play, striding confidently towards a trapdoor she couldn't see, while I, the author, held the lever. Her mother called constantly, her voice a conspiratorial whisper I could hear from across the room. Is he giving you any trouble? She'd ask. Don't let him guilt you, Isabella. You've outgrown him. It's natural. A woman like you needs a man who is her equal, like Julian the enabler, fanning the flames of her daughter's arrogance, completely oblivious to the fact that they were all standing in a pool of gasoline. The day before the signing, as per my instructions, a courier delivered a sleek, professional envelope to our front door. Isabella opened it, her brow furrowed in annoyance. Her expression shifted from confusion to outrage as she read the contents. The divorce papers. She stormed into the guest room where I was reading a book on architectural history. She threw the papers onto the bed. What is this? What kind of pathetic, last-ditch effort is this? Mark. I placed my bookmark carefully in my book and looked up at her. It's a legal document, I said calmly. It outlines the dissolution of our marriage. This is a joke, she spat, her voice rising. No alimony? You're trying to leave me with nothing? After I sacrificed everything to build my company? The company that is about to make us rich. I didn't build the company, Isabella. You did, I said. And the deal hasn't closed yet. She laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Oh, it's closing. And when it does, my lawyers are going to tear you apart. You think this little stunt will work? You are a construction manager, Mark. I am about to be worth almost $1 billion. You are so far out of your league, you can't even see the scoreboard. She was shaking with rage. I remained perfectly still. The offer is what it is, I said. I believe it's more than fair. Fair? She shrieked. You will regret this. You will be begging for scraps when I'm done with you. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. A few minutes later, I heard her on the phone with Julian, recounting the story, her voice dripping with derision. Can you believe the nerve? He's trying to play hardball. It's almost cute. The final day arrived. It was a crisp autumn morning. I woke early, showered, and put on not my usual work clothes, but a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that had been hanging in the back of my closet for years. I selected a simple, dark blue tie and polished my best leather shoes. When I walked into the kitchen, Isabella was already there, dressed in a severe but impossibly expensive power suit. She looked me up and down, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. Trying to look the part of the grieving husband for the lawyers? She sneered. I have a meeting this morning, I said simply, pouring myself a cup of black coffee. Well, don't be late for your little construction briefing, she said, grabbing her briefcase. I have a legacy to build. She walked out the door without another word, climbing into the back of a town car Julian had sent for her. She was on her way to the Aurelian Global Headquarters downtown, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that I happened to own. I finished my coffee in the quiet house. I took my time. I picked up my own briefcase, which contained a single, neatly organized folder, and walked out to my unremarkable pickup truck. I drove downtown, following the same route she had taken, and parked not in the executive garage, but in my private, unmarked spot in the subbasement, accessible only by a special key card. I took a private elevator directly to the top floor. The boardroom was exactly as I had designed it. A massive mahogany table overlooking the city, state-of-the-art teleconferencing equipment, and an air of quiet, unassailable power. My board of directors was already assembled, along with David and the top legal counsel for Aurelian. They all stood as I entered. Good morning, Mr. Harrison. My CEO, a sharp man named Charles, greeted me. I had always insisted my employees call me Mark, but today was different. Today I was Mr. Harrison. Charles, I nodded. Is everything prepared? Everything is in place, David confirmed, tapping the folder in front of him. They are scheduled to arrive in 5 minutes. I took my seat at the head of the table, the one chair that faced the door. From here, I could see the entire city spread out below me, a sprawling testament to what could be built with patience and a solid plan. I felt a strange sense of calm, the quiet focus of a project manager about to execute the most critical phase of a long and difficult job. The doors to the boardroom opened precisely at 10 o'clock. Isabella walked in first, her head held high, a triumphant smile on her face. Julian was right behind her, looking smug and proprietary, his hand resting on the small of her back. They were followed by their 2 lawyers, who looked nervous and out of their depth in such an imposing environment. Isabella's eyes swept the room, taking in the assembled power of the Aurelian board. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second when she saw me. She froze mid-stride, her expression a cocktail of confusion and irritation. "Mark," she said, her voice sharp, "what are you doing here? This is a closed meeting." "Security." Julian stepped forward, puffing out his chest. "I think my associate is right. Sir, you need to leave. This is a private negotiation." No one on my side of the table moved. No one spoke. I just looked at her, my expression unreadable. Charles, my CEO, finally spoke, his voice dry and authoritative. "Mr. Harrison is exactly where he is supposed to be." Isabella's laugh was brittle. "Mr. Harrison? Don't be ridiculous. This is my husband, Mark. He pours concrete for a living." The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. Her own lawyers began to look at each other, a seed of doubt finally planting itself in their minds. Isabella's gaze darted from my face to Charles, then around the table at the stone-faced board members. The triumphant smile had completely vanished, replaced by a creeping dread. "I don't understand," she whispered, looking back at me. "Mark, what is this?" I didn't answer her. I simply gave a slight nod to David. That was the signal. David stood up, calm and professional. He addressed Isabella and her team. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. We have reviewed the terms of the proposed acquisition of Innovatech. However, we will not be moving forward with the deal." The color drained from Isabella's face. "What? You can't do that. We have a letter of intent." "Julian?" She turned to her lover, her voice pleading. Julian was already looking pale. "This is highly irregular," he blustered, trying to regain control. "Aurelian Global doesn't just walk away from a deal this size." "Aurelian Global," David said, his voice cutting through the tension, "also doesn't do business with fraudulent entities. We have conducted our own due diligence, and what we've found is troubling." David opened his folder. He projected a document onto the large screen at the end of the room. It was a bank statement from Innovatech's corporate account. He then projected a second document, a receipt from a 5-star hotel in Paris, a charge for the presidential suite. The dates matched perfectly. "Mrs. Harrison," David said, his tone devoid of any emotion, "can you explain why you used company funds, specifically the initial seed money invested by your husband, to pay for a romantic getaway with Mr. Julian Croft?" Isabella stared at the screen, speechless. Julian began to stammer. "That was a business trip. We were networking." David didn't even look at him. He put up another slide. An email from Julian to Isabella, with the subject line covering our tracks. It detailed exactly how to bury the travel expenses in the company's accounting. "We have records of 7 such trips," David continued relentlessly, totaling over $200,000 in misappropriated funds. "We also have a forensic accounting of Mr. Croft's so-called investment, which appears to be little more than a scheme to acquire equity while defrauding the company's primary investor." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle in the room. Isabella's entire body was trembling. She looked at Julian, her eyes wide with panic, but he refused to meet her gaze. He was staring at the screen, realizing the depth of his exposure. "Therefore," David concluded, "not only is the acquisition terminated, but Aurelian Global is filing a civil suit against both Isabella Harrison and Julian Croft for fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. We will be seeking full restitution of the misused funds, plus punitive damages. The preliminary filing is for $10 million. Isabella made a small, choking sound. Her lawyers were shuffling papers, their faces ashen. They knew they were utterly beaten. Then came the final blow. Charles cleared his throat. And just to be clear on the ultimate authority for this decision, he said, gesturing towards me. All of these actions are taken at the direct order of the sole owner and chairman of Aurelian Global, Mr. Mark Harrison. Isabella's head snapped towards me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The carefully constructed reality she had built for herself, the entire foundation of her arrogance and ambition, crumbled to dust in that single moment. The man she had dismissed, mocked, and humiliated was the very person who held her entire world in the palm of his hand. And he was crushing it. "You?" she finally managed to choke out, her voice a raw, disbelieving whisper. "It was you." Julian, ever the opportunist, saw his only way out. He pointed a shaking finger at Isabella. "This was all her. She told me the money was from her personal savings. She controlled the company's finances. I was just a mentor. I had no idea she was doing any of this." He was already backing away, trying to physically and legally distance himself from the woman he had promised a new life just hours before. That was when she finally broke. The cold, calculating CEO vanished, replaced by a desperate, cornered animal. She launched herself towards the table, her face contorted in a mask of pure rage and disbelief. "You did this to me!" she screamed, her voice echoing in the silent, cavernous room. "You planned this. You let me believe. You miserable, pathetic man. You could have told me." I stood up slowly. I walked around the table until I was standing directly in front of her. Her face was streaked with tears, her expensive makeup running. She looked small and broken. I felt a pang, not of pity, but of a deep, sorrowful melancholy for the woman she once was, for the life we might have had if she had chosen a different path. I looked her directly in the eye. My voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of 15 years of silent observation. "You were right about one thing, Isabella," I said. "This is a world you can't even imagine." Then I turned my back on her. I walked towards the door, leaving her standing there amidst the ruins of her life, with Julian already talking to his own lawyer on his cell phone, abandoning her completely. David and my team would handle the rest. The demolition was complete. I didn't go home. I drove out to the edge of the city, to a site where we were just starting a new project. It was a massive skyscraper that would reshape the city's skyline. I bypassed the main entrance and went to a small, quiet corner of the site where the foundation was being poured. I changed out of my suit and into a pair of worn work boots and a hard hat I kept in my truck. I stood there for a long time, watching the concrete flow, a churning river of gray that would soon harden into an unshakable base. The noise of the machinery was deafening, but in my head, there was only a profound silence. The storm had passed. Order was restored. I had built my fortune on solid ground, with tangible things, with integrity and patience. She had built her dream on a foundation of lies and shortcuts, and it had collapsed just as I knew it would. A structure is only as strong as its foundation. It's a simple rule of engineering and a simple rule of life. She had forgotten that. I never will. My new life was just beginning, built from the ground up, on a foundation that no one could ever shake.